Talking Heads. Uh,
Hello.
yeah, hi. Can someone Can someone volunteer?
Okay,
Shravan?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So instead of like Himaya does, what she does is share the PPT beforehand on the Teams only, and
Hmm.
then she presents the PPT from the Teams. So the
Okay.
PPT doesn't lag at all. So maybe we could try that instead of you sharing your screen.
Oh, like that. Hmm.
Yeah.
I don't mind it. My only my only problem is that I do a lot of live changes on the PPT when I'm with you, and so I can share I have already posted the earlier PPT for you guys to see.
Yeah,
Have
yeah,
you?
that's
Yeah.
it. But when you are doing the lecture, when you change the slides,
Ah,
sometimes it lags. So we can't understand what you are saying, so it comes later on. So it
okay.
gets a little
So
bit
so
confusing.
should I do that right now? Does that help?
If it's okay with, if you feel it's
Yeah.
better, we can do
Yeah,
it because
my only problem is that PPT has so many things that I might not do and things like that. So I have to structure the PPT exactly for you guys for this class. Okay.
We
Like
can
for
actually
example,
follow the order
okay.
when you're
No, no,
presenting it.
I know. I'll share it with you anyways. So just give me a sec.
yeah, yeah.
See, Shirish, I have a suggestion. When
Hmm.
you move from one slide to the other slide, just
Take
wait
break.
for a couple of seconds. Yeah. So that
Okay. So let's do
the slide appears on the screen.
Yeah, let's do this today like this. Okay, next time we will upload the PPT beforehand, and then everybody
Right.
can download it and see it while we are talking. Yeah, is that okay?
If you do need to make live edits, maybe something like Google, what's the Google alternative to PowerPoint or something which kind of
I'm
does all
using
the thing.
I'm using Google Slides to make PPT. Okay, the difficulty is for you guys is in terms of well, there's a lot of hum. Huh? The difficulty is when you guys are not able to go in the same sequence and flow with my conversation with you. So what I'll do is I'll take it slow. Let's take each slide slowly, yeah, for today. Okay, just a second. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Are you able to see a full screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll take it slow so that everybody gets a little bit of time before the next slide. So we'll do a little bit of a lag between the slides. Okay, so what we have done this time is this presentation is broken into three parts. Okay, the first part will talk about parts of building construction as an activity. The second part will give you some kind of an introduction to the different components of building. Okay, and in the third part, we want to show you guys some cases where we have tried to sort of analyze the components of the buildings as well as what those components actually do in order to structure those buildings in a certain way. The idea is to so although your course in construction focuses on primarily RCC, so we are going to cover a lot of RCC related sort of components of buildings in this lecture as well. But it is important to constantly keep reminding ourselves that RCC is just one of the ways in which buildings get built. There are many different ways in which buildings can be put together. Okay, so all right, can you see the slide?
Yes.
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 Okay, good. So let's remember that construction projects come in different scales and the tasks are also very different. Okay, for example, you might have small renovation projects or repair jobs where the owner may act as a designer, and there might be a kind of a contractor who contracts for the owner, and he gets a laborer, and then they do the entire project together. Okay. A large part of the construction process in the country actually happens in this mode. The architect's involvement is absolutely not there. But there are more complex projects, okay, that require additional multidisciplinary expertise and manpower. Okay, so the owner may commission one or more specialists sort of to undertake, say, detailed planning, design, construction, and handover of work, etc. Okay, often the owner will appoint one set of sort of business to oversee the entire project. So what happens is that there is one company that actually has a designer, a contractor, a construction manager that come together also is possible. Yeah. Some things to remember: the design must not only be structurally sound and appropriate for the use of location, but must also be financially possible to build and legal to use. Yeah. I'll go ahead. So the entire building construction activity broadly can be divided into these 9 parts. There's something called planning and strategic definition that happens at the very onset of the idea of the project itself. Okay. Then there's the aspect of finance. There are legal procedures. Yeah. There are issues of procurement, designing of the building itself. Yeah. It's on-site construction, commissioning and handover, maintenance and repair and improvements to a building, and up to the stage of demolition. Okay. If you notice, the design stage where the building actually gets designed happens a little later. Okay. But there are parts of designing that have already started happening in the planning and strategic definition stage. In many cases, the architect will be involved from the very onset of the idea of the project itself. In some cases, not so. So what does it mean to plan and to give strategic definition? Is the slide seen by everyone?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So any client needs to first understand what is the scope of the project. Okay. Sometimes it is the role of the architect to actually support and define the role of the scope of the project. Yeah. What are the pros and cons of the project? What are the risks of the project? What kind of risks are there which are budgetary? What kind of risks are there that are based on the sites? Yeah. So there is a complete planning appraisal that needs to happen, and this happens in the initial stage. Yeah. A proposed construction must also comply to local land use planning policies like zoning and building codes, etc. Yeah. Any project that we are actually part of, okay, should acknowledge that it is within a jurisdiction of local authorities, okay, and it is subject to the local authorities and their inspections and their site surveys and their investigations. Yeah. We cannot ever think that just because there is a client and he has a site that we can go ahead and do anything that we please. There are jurisdictions in place for each building and each construction. This is primarily because construction is an activity that is related to what is called the right to life in our constitution. Okay, it is one of the kind of important factors in the idea of right to life. Having a home, having a safe shelter is a part of it, and hence it comes directly as a part of your responsibilities. As an architect working with a client, it is also in this stage that a project brief is prepared, etc. Yeah, feasibility studies, site surveys, and so on and so forth. So if you are in Bombay and if you're doing any construction in Bombay, yeah, there are certain development control regulations that are in place. You can go to this to the links here, and you can find the entire set of DCRs that are already in place. They are constantly modified and changed as time progresses. This one is a draft DCR right now. Parts of it have already been approved. What the DCR also does is that it works with what is called the development plan of the city, where you will find that each and every little parcel of land in the city is defined. Each and every parcel of land in the city has been given a certain purpose and function, looking at the larger development of the city. This is called the development plan of the city of Mumbai. I'm just showing you one image over here. This is in the western suburbs. This is exactly, I think, where Oshiwara and things are there. And you can see that this plan actually has a lot of colors, and there is a very detailed index that is put below the plan that identifies each of those colors and each of those numbers and what all is actually existing in those parcels, or what all should be existing in those parcels. It has both of these. So, for example, if you look at social amenities, there is a number SA 1.1. It says municipal retail market. There is a number SA 1.3. It says a wholesale market. Okay, each of this is actually a architectural program that requires construction to happen. Okay, I'm just showing you the entire sort of legend of a development plan to give you an idea at what is the scope of construction as a field when it comes to the city of Mumbai. Any place that you are in, you can go online and you can find the development plan for your own city and your own areas as well, and also the development control regulations of that area. Second is the issue of finance. Depending on the type of project, there are bankers, accountants, cost engineers that may participate in creating an overall plan. Yeah. There are also public-private partnerships or private finance initiatives which may be used to deliver major projects, like in the case of, say, your metro, or in the case of your, railway stations, larger projects which are actually done through public-private partnerships. For smaller projects, the client herself could be a source of finance, occasionally borrowing from a bank. Yeah. Legal aspects of the project. There is a complex net of construction contracts and other legal obligations which have to be in place, and they have to be carefully considered. A contract is the exchange of a set of obligations between two or more parties and provides a structure to manage issues. For example, if there is construction delay, that can be costly. So construction contracts set out clear expectations and paths to manage delays. This is just one example. Yeah. A poorly drafted contract can lead to confusion and costly disputes. Let's understand, these are all aspects of construction. A contract between the client and the architect becomes a very important thing in order to manage the entire project. Okay, if you don't have a good contract between the client, okay, and the architect, for example, just now we are talking just the client and architect, there can be many contingencies that can come up which will not get resolved. Yeah, at the start of the project, a legal advisor will seek to identify all ambiguities. Yeah, and in order to avoid and resolve conflicts that arise actually. Another very important thing to remember, there is a contract at every point of interaction between different agencies involved in construction, meaning there is a contract between the architect and the client, between the architect and the contractor, between the contractor and his subcontractor, between any agencies that are involved. There is a contract that has to be in place. Sorry. Fourth are the issues of procurement. Okay. And this is done in three possible ways. There are other ways also, but these are the primary three ways. So one is what is called design, bid and build, which is the most commonly established sort of way of procuring. In this arrangement, the architect or engineer acts for the client as a project coordinator. They design the work, prepare specifications and deliverables. They administer the contract, tender the works, and manage the work from inception to completion. Yeah. There can be other contractual links between the client and the main contractor. That's also possible here. The second is a way which has become more popular recently, is what is called design build. Okay, here the client contracts a single entity to provide a complete sort of design and construction package to him. Okay, the client says that you design for me and you deal with everything else. Okay, I want my building to be ready at this point of time, and that's it. Here, whoever is the architect or the main construction company has to make contracts with their own teams in order to give a product to the client. Yeah, if there are many interior design firms that operate in both these kind of forms. The third, which is a larger kind of an arrangement, is what is called construction management. This is generally done in very large projects, yeah, where there are multiple kinds of agencies and technical kind of agencies involved in a project. Fifth comes the stage of design, which is divided into three fundamental stages: concept design, detailed developed design, and technical design. Okay, let's understand the difference between detailed developed design and technical design. Okay, detailed developed design is a stage where the architect and designers are expected to bring their initial concept designs to a level of detail and integration, including coordination and updated proposals for structural design, building services, outline, cost information, project strategies, in accordance with the design program. Yeah, spatial coordination could be completed and change control procedures introduced. You will prepare. So basically, you are detailing the entire project in this stage. In the technical design stage, it refers to project activities that take place after the design or detailed design or definition has been completed, but before the construction contract is tendered. Technical designs may also include tender documents and all other information required to manufacture components. Yeah. So if components have to be manufactured, those details come as a part of the technical designs. Your shop designs or shop drawings of smaller components are also part of the technical design. Okay, so there's a little bit of a difference between the two. And then there are these three other stages, which is on-site construction, commissioning and handover, maintenance and repair contracts. You can read them as you go along. Okay, so this is broadly the entire sort of activity of construction and its sort of related parts. Okay, what I would like now is to Mamta, I'll just do 2-3 more slides and then you can take over. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. So what I was thinking is that we sort of ask you guys, what are the components of building? If I ask you, what are the components of building? Can you give us a few?
Components like a building component, right? Or
yeah. Building components.
Basic. You can start as columns, beams.
Okay.
Brackets, ledges.
Okay.
Walls.
Uh-huh.
Openings, fenestrations.
Right.
Doors.
Anyone else?
Walls and floors.
Floors, walls. Okay. What else?
Lintels, damp-proof course.
Damp-proof course. Okay. Is a damp-proof course a component of a building, or is it part of another component? I'm asking. I'm just asking this.
I think it's a part of the component.
Okay. So what are the components?
Services and the parts that come included with those.
Okay.
So electric, plumbing, heating.
And do you think that the components of building vary depending on what kind of building you are making and what material you are using?
Yeah.
They would.
They would vary, right? So you would have
right.
if you're building a timber structure, the components of building will be some other ones also. Okay. We are purely discussing right now the different components of building. We are not discussing right now how those components are made. Okay. We are just saying that a building has several components and that we should be able to, in many ways, dissect the fundamental components of building as the first step of learning what the building is made of. Yeah. Okay. So just to give you, so you're right. All the things that you said said are right, except a damp proof course, okay, is not. Sorry, someone's saying something. Hi, I'm listening. Okay, except that a damp proof course is not a component of a building, it is part of another component. So it could be part of, say, the plinth, okay, or it could be part of a wall. All right, somebody is speakers are on and we are listening to their private conversations. Guys, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so fundamentally speaking, when we are thinking about, say, an RCC building, you can break the entire building into these fundamental components. You have a foundation, you have a plinth, you have walls and columns, you have floors, lintels, chhajjas, roof, doors and windows, stairs and lifts, finishing, building services, and external works, which include your fencing, paving, landscaping, etc. Broadly, we can break it up into these kinds. Mamta, 2 more slides and you should take over, yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay. I'm now showing you basic building in RCC. Okay, there are fundamentally 2 kinds of buildings that you can make in that you will largely see. We are going to see other examples also, but largely you can see these kind of buildings. One is what is a solid construction. Okay, in solid construction, what you will find is that the walls are generally load bearing, but the slabs can be in RCC, your lintels can be in RCC. Okay, this is one kind of construction. Okay, how many of you have been to a CEP building in Ahmedabad? Have you guys been there?
All of us.
All of us.
All of you have been. Okay, CEP is a great example of what is called solid construction. Okay, it uses large load-bearing walls as the fundamental building kind of component, and it uses a slab which is an RCC slab that is constructed using a series of beams and things like that, right? So that is a solid construction. As against that, you look at any building that is built right now around us is actually a frame or skeletal construction, yeah, where you have a complete kind of framing that happens, and then walls are actually infilled. Walls are infilled. I'm showing you 2 other kinds. Okay, yeah. The third one is where the structure consists of a series of interconnected plates forming a structural wall and floor.
We can't see your next screen.
It's coming.
Are you still on?
I'll say it again. Is it there?
No.
Not yet for me.
No.
We wait.
The solid construction and the frame, right?
Yeah, so you understood the solid construction and the frame construction?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm showing you
The
2 others.
panel or construction and the folded plate construction.
Yes. Is everybody seeing that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So there are these 2 others that I am showing you. There are others also which will come later, not right now. But there are these 2 other ways in which an RCC construction can also be imagined. Okay, where one on the left hand side you're seeing that the entire slab and wall is actually extruded in order to make a structure. And and if I look outside my window right now, many of the high rises these days are actually built like this, where you see a complete extrusion of a wall that comes all the way from the lower floor rising up. Okay, and you see very little of of infill. The entire wall is actually raised in RCC. Okay, so this is on the left hand side is what we call panel or box construction, and on the right hand side is a folded plate construction where primarily the roof is constructed in a folded plate. There can be many different ways in which the plate is folded. Okay, and the columns take the entire load of the folded plate down. So this is another way in which you can imagine an RCC construction. I'll stop over here. Okay, in each of these four kinds, the components actually change. Let's remember that. Yeah, in each of these kinds, component change. It will be a good exercise for you guys to look at all three of them and identify the basic components in them. Mamta, you want to take over? I'll switch off.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, is there a question?
Panel or box construction, can we have windows in the RCC wall?
Yes, it is possible. It is possible. Okay. But your windows will have to be designed, meaning the entire reinforcement structure of that wall will have to be designed, keeping in mind that there is a window that has to be made. Meaning, I don't know, and Neeraj, you should help here. Meaning,
yeah, actually, it should the reinforcement bar which we design internally that shouldn't that should be designed as well. That's why it should be redesigned. Many of the times people right now do a thing like they just cut off the slab or cut off the shear wall, which is a very bad practice.
Very bad practice.
Yeah, so that shouldn't happen. That's, and also in this kind of construction, panel or box construction, you also have to take the services in account. Because later you can't make a hole for some pipes or anything, so it should be like very pre-planned, all the services as well.
There are advantages to this kind of box construction, which is that, but it requires complete planning, like how Neeraj is saying. Yeah, and it is Neeraj, correct me if it is wrong. It is actually technically not legal to cut through the through an RCC structure like that, right?
It is not. It is not.
It is not legal.
It is not. You have to, I mean, check with the structural engineer, and if he approves that it won't hamper the structural integrity, then only you can touch the reinforcement or cut or do something.
Clear? Does that answer some of your question?
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So I'm now switching off and let Mamta take over, and then I'll take over again. Mamta, go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, Shirish. Just let me know when my screen has come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see it? Okay.
I can see it, but I'll wait for some of the others.
Yeah, we can.
All right.
We can see it.
Yeah.
It's up.
So perfectly taking on from what Shirish has shown you, there are these systems and the principles that they are based on that we had touched upon in the first year, if you remember correctly, right? And the most important part of any structure is the system that it is based on, because that is the system which is helping the structure remain stable and remain what we have called as firm, right? It takes on a number of loads, as you can see in the diagram. This I have borrowed from your first year presentation itself. Yeah. So it is very essential that the building remains in equilibrium. Only then your building will be stable and there will be no vibrations in it. And of course, it's not going to lead to collapse. So that's the first thing that we have to keep in mind. We might choose any kind of system. Right now, Shirish showed you 4 or 5 of those examples. So we have a free choice of the kind of system that we want to use. But it's only understanding the principles on which that system is based that will help us design a building, design that structure for stability and for lasting long. Okay. So like I said, this is what we have taken from the first year. In the first year, we explored two kinds of system. One is the skeletal system, like Shirish also mentioned. This RCC or timber or even a brick pure kind of a system can be called as a frame structure or a skeleton structure, where basically the frame takes the load of the entire structure. That is what is transferring the load right from the rooftop to the ground, to the soil, right? And the other one we saw is where the entire structure is doing the job of transferring the loads, correct? So we come to concrete frame structures. This is what we're going to be doing this semester, mainly dealing with RCC, right? And there are these different components that a building is made of, an RCC building. Okay? We have discussed the different kinds of loads last time. If you want to recap, the dead loads are the loads of the building itself. It's coming from the weight of the building, the structural elements, the walls, the finishes, all that contribute to the dead load of that structure. There are also live loads of the structure, that is the occupants in the building, right? So whatever you bring in later on after your structure has been prepared contribute to the live loads of the building. There are also what we call as dynamic loads. So in, for example, when you look at bridges and highways, you have traffic that is continuously moving along these structures, and those are called as the dynamic loads. Then wind loads are very evident. They're self-explanatory. You have sky rises, tall buildings that are subject to loads because the wind speeds at that kind of height are very high. There are also earthquake loads or vibrations that your building has to take care of. Let me move my slide. Yeah. So concrete like RCC structures are very common. We can see them all around us. And what sort of makes up a concrete building is the reinforced cement concrete. We need to look at the formwork, and we need to look at the concrete mix. Okay, not cement mixer, the concrete mix that goes into the building of that structure. So what is a concrete mix, right? There are different components to concrete. That is cement, sand, aggregate, and water, and they are mixed at different proportions to give you concrete. Now, currently, the use of sand has been banned because of illegal sand mining that has taken on magnanimous proportions. So, what we do is we crush the small aggregate really into very fine particles, and that itself is used as sand. Okay. So now what is this design ratio or this concrete mix ratio that we are talking about, and what does it help us achieve? Okay. Let me know if my slides are moving. Okay.
Yeah, they are. For me, they are
Okay.
moving.
Okay.
Shravan, you have to also reply.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm. Is there any background disturbance on my mic?
Yeah,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is. There
How
is.
many?
Okay.
Uh, yeah. Okay. Give me a sec. So now, depending on the strength of the concrete, right? You want concrete to achieve a certain kind of strength for a specific kind of structure. And based on that, you're going to design this mix of the concrete. The way that we refer to these different mixes are M20, M30, M40. I think it goes right up to M100. And that is what indicates the strength of the concrete. So if we're looking at M20, it's 20 newtons per mm square. If it is M30, it's 30 newtons per mm square. So like I said, depending on the strength that you want to achieve, you're going to have to design your mix. Now, right at the start on site, you will see that different concrete mixes are created in these cubes which have to get tested. So you take a standard sized cube. There's a formwork which readily exists on site. You pour the concrete into these forms, and then that is subject to testing when it is loaded, and then you you sort of identify at what point of load that concrete cube can be crushed. And based on that, the architect and the engineer will approve the concrete mix that has to be used for construction. So what does this RCC frame structure basically do? Okay, I am borrowing again from Corbusier and his domino construction. I think we have seen this example earlier as well. And we're looking at a very basic kind of skeleton, right? The yellow lines are indicating the load that is coming from the slab. In this case, there is also a partial cantilever. The red lines are the horizontal red lines are indicating the beams. So there will be beams onto which this load is getting transferred. And finally, the load comes down vertically through the columns to the foundation and into the soil. So what are these components? Like I mentioned, there are slabs. These are also reinforced concrete. There are beams, again reinforced concrete. Columns, the vertical members. These are transferring the load to the foundations. The other elements that you will also observe are the elevator shafts and the shear walls, if any, or if required. We don't go about putting shear walls anywhere and anytime we feel like, okay? Because they add to the cost of the structure, right? Now coming to the columns, the RCC columns. What do you mean firstly by a reinforced concrete column, or what do you mean by RCC? We have seen concrete, we've seen the strength of concrete, the different mixes of concrete. And what we very well know from the first year is that concrete is good at taking compression. And because of this kind of varying kind of load that these members are subject to, it is essential that concrete also is able to take care of the tension that is coming on it, right? And this material that helps us in dealing with the tension in these members is steel, which is why we reinforce this concrete with steel members, which are the reinforcement bars, and hence we've arrived at what is called as reinforced cement concrete. And that is what we use in our structures, because concrete is not in itself capable of handling both compression as well as tension, right? So columns are the vertical members. They're definitely going to be taking more of compression than tension, while beams that are horizontal members are subject to both compression as well as tension. And then you will observe that the reinforcement is put on the lower part in the central region. It is put on the lower part of the beam to be able to handle that tension. There are different kinds of foundations in concrete and RCC. We have a regular isolated footing. The isolated footing also varies, right? You can see the one top left, which is a kind of typical traditional kind of RCC footing, where it is like shaped like a trapezoid. Then we have also a pad footing, which is just like a cuboid, and both of them can be used or can be converted into eccentric kind of footing where the load is concentrated on one part of it. Okay, now we have also discussed this, like I said earlier, where the site conditions is what determines in which way you're designing this footing, right? The minute that I don't have space to extend beyond a certain edge of my site, I have to choose eccentric footings, right? Because you observe then that the right hand side has been curtailed, it has been shortened, right? This sort of occurs due to these kind of constraints on site. Yeah, so you can see the RCC column to the right. There are combined footings. There's a raft foundation which you see. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there are upturned beams here and this maze of columns that you can see. Okay. There are also pile foundations, which we've touched on in the first year. Now we'll be not going into the details of pile foundation. an old drawing actually, which I've retrieved from the internet itself, which shows the distribution of reinforcement in the foundation. This is form work. This is very essential, right? We know that concrete is mixed to a consistency that it can be easily poured, right? And I have to wait for a specific amount of time for the concrete to set, right? And hence, what I have to use is what we call as formwork, which gives me the mold into which the concrete has to be poured. So the formwork comes in different types. It can be like wooden formwork, it can be metal formwork, and this formwork is also used repeatedly on the site. I really can't afford to create, a new formwork for every floor. So I'm using the same formwork throughout the floors. So I have to ensure that I can use this formwork repeatedly. So that is the way in which I look at how I'm going to make or prepare that formwork, right? I have to ensure that my costs are minimum. Here's metal formwork, which can be used repeatedly. It also helps in modular kind of construction, and also that the plain construction which Shirish showed, and something which is known as Maivan construction, where everything is standardized. So we use the same formwork on one particular site. If I have two or three residential buildings coming up on that site, it's the same formwork that I'm going to use throughout. One other essential element in structures is, I mean, you have to do a guesswork in this image, but it's a cantilever. If you see this signal lamppost, just look at the length of that lamppost, okay? It's entirely a cantilever. It is completely resting on the left-hand side vertical member that is there. So this is one very essential component of structures that help you to design very creatively, okay? Of course, we will not get into the details of the reinforcement, but just to give you an idea that there are definitely in an RCC cantilever, there are reinforcement bars that are doing their job of transferring that load. This is a structure which is really very sort of deceptive, okay? This is the Barcelona Pavilion, and it gives you an impression of being really very light. It also gives you an impression of being very free. There is nothing that is sort of that you can see as huge columns that is supporting that slab. Okay. Now, the fact that the slabs are hiding the beams is a different story altogether. But I just want to show you is how elegantly a cantilever can be used, how elegantly a structure can be designed to portray this kind of impression that it is such a lightweight structure, and that single column over there can take all that load, or these slender columns can take the load. Okay. This is another structure. Look at this picture. I'm just giving you a couple of examples. There are many examples for cantilevers, but look at this. This sort of gives you an impression that this rooftop, you don't want it falling over your head, because you feel like it's a real heavy kind of cantilever that's hanging over you. And this is the way that it is designed. It is a complete sort of uh, a metal kind of truss within the structure, and that's what is helping it sort of cantilever for a length of 163 meters. Okay, we won't get into the details, like I said. This is just to show you what you can achieve with different materials. So yes, coming back to our vertical members, the columns, what is essential to see in this, the details of concrete and reinforcement will be done in your structures class, but I just want to sort of get you familiar with the fact that when you're looking at square columns, when the size increases, how your main reinforcement starts working in that column. So you'll see the number of reinforcement increases. If you look carefully, you will see two different diameters of reinforcement. So there is something which is the main reinforcement, and maybe what is like a distribution or the sub kind of reinforcement. All this is tied together with the help of stirrups or tie. Okay, that is what holds the reinforcement in place. And there is what we call as spacers. That is what we use to keep a distance between the formwork and the reinforcement. And when we sort of pour the concrete into this formwork, the spacers help us to give that minimum distance that we require from the reinforcement to the edge. Okay. So just to run you through different kinds of columns, you also have circular columns and you have rectangular columns, L-shaped columns, T-shaped columns. So you completely have a free hand to design in any which way you want. There is no kind of restriction in using any of these columns. There is no given, right? When you start designing, when we start with a studio exercise and you start designing, there is no given. It's not that in the corner I will want to use an L-shaped column or I'll use a T-shaped column or it has to be a circular one or it has to be a rectangular one. This gives you the complete freedom to design in any which way that you want. All you have to make sure of is that the load that is coming from the top is carried out to the bottom. Just some examples. Neeraj, do you want to add anything here? This is a combined footing. This is the pit or the trench for the foundation. Yeah, Neeraj, you want to add something?
Just wanted to know if you guys do you guys know what is the difference between main reinforcement and the distribution reinforcement? Any of you? Why we are naming some of the steel bars main reinforcement and others as a distribution or a spacers? So basically, yeah, Shravan.
So the main reinforcements, do they take the load straight downwards while the distribution ones move them laterally to kind of take them to the main reinforcements?
Partly, but the main reinforcement deals with the tensile strength in the element. So, as we know that the steel is better in tension and the concrete is better in compression. So, wherever there is a tensile force acting more than what is required than concrete, there we use main reinforcement. Yeah. So that has to be kept in mind when they are deciding the design of column or beam or slab. Yeah.
Sorry, Neeraj, I had asked another question to the students. What is a structural component and what is not?
Can someone?
Can someone? Somebody else, Shravan, this time. What is a structural component and what is not?
A structural component could be one that takes load, like axial tension, compression, or is required in the entire structure to take load or transfer it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, structural component is basically which is like non-movable part of the structure. Like it's basically like the thing on which the building stands on. So you can't actually like move it or like probably do anything with it for that matter. Wherein like there are these walls, so they are not our structural members. So you can actually like break them or probably make openings through them. Something
you
of
can
that
break
sort.
you can break them because
they are not the structural members, like they do not help take the load, right?
Correct.
Okay, so
correct. So go ahead, Neeraj, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So in short, let me tell you, the structural member is the one which is a part of the path which transfers load of the structure to the ground. So let it be foundation, beam, column, slab, whatever it is. So these parts like chhaja, yes, they are a part of a building which is, but that can't be termed as a structural member because they are not transferring the, they are not helping in transferring the load to the ground. So yeah, in short, the definition of structures, elements, whatever elements which transfer the load to the ground.
Okay, Mamta, you want to continue? Hello, Mamta, are you there?
I think I muted myself. Okay. Yeah. So we were looking at sort of the reinforcement in these different elements or these of the structure, right? This is an elevator pit, not a foundation pit, like I said earlier. So this is an elevator pit where that base of your lift or your elevator sits. Okay. So this is also reinforced. That's the footing which we saw earlier. This is with the with the reinforcement. These are concrete walls, like Shirish had shown you the walls earlier, the panels. They also take in reinforcement, and that's why, like he rightly said, you need to predetermine where maybe you want to have the fenestrations, where you want your electric connections. If your plumbing connections want to come out of this, you got to predetermine them and make arrangements for it prior to construction. Waffle slab we look at later. Yeah. Now, this is one thing which I found very interesting, and I thought I should bring it to your notice. Is like I said, when you want the freedom to design based on the kind of spaces that you are looking at, it is not necessary that a square column from the top comes down to a square column at the lower floor. You are free to design it in a way that you have a square column on top, because on the first floor you have a different kind of space, a different kind of function, and you want uh, at the lower floor, you want it to become a circular column because again, it's a different kind of function below. And then if you observe, that's the way that the reinforcement goes, right? There's a slight bend that is given. Obviously, the column on top is a smaller column. In size, it is a smaller column. And then it comes down to a slightly larger circular column below. So take a look at the plan and this section where you can see the reinforcement. Like I said, this is very essential because you may not want to get into all the engineering and the structural details, but when you sit with an engineer to design the structure for your building, if you have this kind of basic knowledge, if you have this understanding, because it's not only construction that's teaching you, structures is also teaching you this, you can sit with your engineer and design the building to what you have envisaged it to be, to the fullest. Okay, that is where we then talk about aesthetics or delight in a building. Okay, that's a rectangular column which has now become a circular column below, right? So again, you're not restricting yourself at all in terms of the structural design. That's the connection of the beam to the column. Again, this reinforcement has to get anchored. Please understand one thing, we're looking at stability in the structure. We don't want any kind of vibration to disturb the stability of a structure. So all these horizontal reinforcement are very well anchored to the column reinforcement. This is when a metal beam is anchored to the RCC column. The staircase slab is also reinforced. It's an RCC stair slab, and this can be done in two ways. One way is where you just crank the slab, as you can see it here, and your actual steps, that is the tread and riser, can be constructed after this, on top of this. The other way to do it is to have the entire slab in RCC. So your entire, like your tread, riser, as well as that base slab is reinforced. And this is how the base of that base slab, of the step slab, is anchored to the floor or to the ground. Like I said, everything has to be anchored. Everything gets tied up. Where what you saw in Chakrata was a fantastic example where all these timber members were tying up with each other. And that's exactly the way that they ensured that the vibrations coming from the ground due to the minor tremors that you have or earthquakes that you have still ensured that the entire structure stood stable. Okay. Then we come to slabs, right? We're going to look at very simple slabs today. This is a basic RCC slab. Uh, it can be categorized into a one-way slab and a two-way slab. So what is the difference between a one-way slab and a two-way slab? You have the main reinforcement in the one-way slab running in a singular direction, while in a two-way slab, it runs in both the direction. Okay. How do you determine when to use a one-way slab and when do you use a two-way slab? It's coming out from the proportion of that slab. So when I have a rectangular slab, right, like you see in the image above, when they're saying that Lx is greater than twice Ly, so that makes it rectangular or slightly more than, I mean, slightly where your Lx is more than Ly by twice. That is when you use a one-way slab. So your reinforcement will run only in one direction. While when you have the proportion of a slab which is slightly squarish, where Lx is almost equal to Ly, then you're going to have to use a two-way slab. Maybe Neeraj, you can explain how the distribution of load works here, which is why we choose to have reinforcements in both the directions or just one direction.
Yeah. They might know about ribbed slab, right? So, Eric. Oh,
No, so ribbed slab will be showing them later, actually. Yeah.
So in one-way slab, basically the primary beams are supported on either side of that. Like if you see in the first image, the primary beams are supported along. The primary beams are on columns along Lx, the larger wala size, which are attached with the perpendicular tensile reinforcement. So in single way. But in the second example, in two-way slab, the proportion is much squarish. So basically, the primary beams are around the periphery of these four columns. So the main steel is that the main reinforcement is engaged with all four beams in all directions. So it equally distributes on all four sides. Guys, if it is a bit complicated, you can ask, unmute and ask, because I might not know how much you have understood. So.
I think Neeraj, this will be also brought in their structures discussion, right?
Yeah,
so
later,
yeah. Later on, it will be repeated again. So this
So-
time is just like a intro, but as we go further in our lectures, we'll be revisiting some of these things in much detail.
Correct.
So I think Shravan has a very interesting question. He's saying, can someone technically bring down the building by piercing columns strategically? Yes, Shravan, you can definitely bring a building down by even unstrategically damaging the columns. You don't have to think too much about it. Okay. So I want to give you this interesting example. I do this every year and I talk about this in every construction class. Okay. So Professor Sathe, Shirish closely works with him actually. So he gave this fantastic example. He had a project happening in Indore, okay, and this was like really very many years ago when traveling from one city to the other itself was a big thing, and doing a project somewhere else also was kind of exotic, right? So he catches the flight, he goes to Indore, uh, all set to go out for his meeting, and because it's his general route of travel, he's observing the buildings around him, obviously. uh, by the time he's back to his hotel in the evening, one of the buildings has collapsed. And obviously, being an architect and probably having an engineer for his company, he gets in, he gets into the building, and he speaks to people around there. So what have these people gone and done to get the building to collapse within a day's time? Is that they cut the plinth beams of that building. They actually sawed into this building under the ground because they wanted that extra space, they wanted that extra height, and they thought that just by cutting through the plinth, they're creating negative space ना, floor के नीचे काट रहे हैं से, okay, तो plinth beam पूरा काट ही डाला, okay, that's what they did, and without realizing that that's going to damage the building. So by the time he said, this is what he mentioned, by the time he was back from work in the evening, the entire building had collapsed. So yes, Shravan, you have to be very careful into seeing what exactly. In fact, like Shirish also always mentions, the best way to learn about structures is to see how an element collapses. Okay. So
No,
even
but
in our AV rooms, Shirish, I have to complete this.
nah,
Even
nah,
in our
go.
AV room, we go about drilling into the beams because we want to hang something, because we want to do something, without thinking about the kind of damage that we are doing to the structure. Oh, someone's already mentioned that. Yes, you're drilling into the beams in the studios.
Yeah, but
You're
there
drilling
is
into the in the
yeah, but Shravan, please. What you are suggesting is that we make a hole through the column. Okay. Uh, there is a tolerance that any, like for example, there's a wall behind me, right? So I'm hanging my these frames paintings over here. Okay, I'm actually putting nails into it. I am not entering into the space of structural stability of that wall. Okay, the minute I enter into the space of structural stability of any member, whether it is RCC or it is timber or it is steel, I'm actually disturbing that structural stability. So yes, so regardless of what material it is, if today I decide to puncture holes through and through this wall, and I make many of those holes, okay, I'm actually disturbing the structural stability of this wall. Okay, whether this wall structural stability is actually connected to the stability of the entire structure, that is a different matter. Okay, this wall may be an infill wall, so it has a very different logic of structural stability to it. Okay, but there is a column next to it over here. If I'm now going to start messing around with the column, I'm calling for disturbance to the entire structure. Yeah, and there is a you will learn this a little later also, what those laws are. But structural components of a building cannot be altered in any way. Uh, it is a crime to actually alter structural components. Alter, meaning removal of a structural component, not allowed. You can't shift structural components once they are made without due permission from a structural engineer. Can damaging a slab affect structural stability? Yes, it can. It can definitely. What is Ambika saying? I'm not. Ambika, can you read it? What is it? A plate can
Yeah,
be
I
envisaged.
read this in the DK Jain construction book. I think this is what's similar to what Neeraj was saying.
Yeah.
So if this helps, it just says all the forces that act on the slab. So there's shear, there's torsion, and then there's also bending. And how, because it's a two-way slab, it's multi-directional. So
Yeah.
the forces travel in all directions. So it
Yeah.
helps with the dispersion of load.
Yeah. Okay, Mamta, you want to go ahead?
Can I
So
say
we are just
something?
Yeah.
yes,
Somebody
of
wants to
course.
say something.
I just wanted to clear something like how we have like girders, binders, and joists in frame structures. The reinforcements act similarly in RCC structures.
Okay, so if you
Yeah,
have to compare it, okay, Neeraj, yeah, you can go ahead.
I mean, not in so much wide manner, but like if you consider the beams, which are your primary element, then it supports the slab, which has the again smaller elements, the reinforcement bars. But since we have concrete as a material, we are able to span it much more than the wooden elements.
Hmm. Hmm. Uh,
Also, Aishwarya, if you remember your studio, uh, uh, you have seen larger beams and certain smaller beams, right?
Yeah,
These
yeah,
smaller beams get into the larger beams. So that is something which you can equate with the girder binder system. Only thing is it's not one above the other. In the case of timber
right,
members, these members are laid one above the other. Okay.
right.
So
Yeah.
because of this advancement in technology, right? Now technology is advanced. We've discovered concrete. Then we discover that concrete really can't take tension. So we started putting reinforcement into them. Then we've even gone ahead and started designing very slender sort of slabs, slender beams, and you finally really can't see any of these elements anymore in the newer buildings and structures. Okay?
Right. I just wanted to say that, like because I observed that in the one-sided reinforcement slab, it was spanning the shorter distance as well, like the reinforcements. It was,
Yes, absolutely. Very good observation. Absolute.
which is why
There is
the thing came in mind that even when we're making wooden timber frame structures, we span the shorter distance.
Yeah, we also want to save on the timber, Aishwarya.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
had
so
a
can I
doubt
go
regarding.
ahead? Ah,
I
yeah,
had
go
a
ahead,
doubt
go ahead.
regarding the columns. So, can we have a column reinforced circular and have a rectangular profile or a square profile?
You mean the reinforcements are in a circular way, but the profile is square?
Yes.
Generally, it is
Yeah,
not done.
but it is
Sorry.
possible. It's
It is
possible.
possible, but
You
generally
can
it
do
is not done because the distribution of steel in the cross section is also important where you are placing your bars. So just have to take care about that, and then we can design as what we want.
Okay.
It's also the question of why would you want to do that, right? So depending
Actually,
on what
it is
it
going
is
to
that
be
you want
hidden
to
Maybe
anyway.
you might
do,
save
extra
some steel in that,
concrete.
right?
No, but then you are exposing
No.
more concrete to tensile stresses without having steel it in the corners. So what will happen is that your corner will actually show they will deflect differently, the corner parts. Yeah, you understand?
Right.
Mm. Because you are letting that corner free from reinforcement.
Even
Since you're
placement of the steel is very much decided as per the design. So we only keep like 20 or 30 mm above the steel, not more than that. Otherwise, it might crack over.
But let me tell you, older buildings, for example, we say in Shivaji Park, in the older buildings, what they would do is that they would round the square columns. Oh, sorry, they would round the square columns. So actually the column is square, but in the plaster you actually have rounded edges to the columns. So that is done. Yeah. So inside there is a square column, but on the outside you don't get pointed edges. You actually get smooth edges, if that's the intention that you have.
Oh, okay.
Shirish?
Yeah.
I have triangle is a more stable structure, हम लोग पढ़ते हैं पहले से, तो हर कॉलम स्क्वायर क्यों होता है? और मैंने चर्च गेट में कहीं पे एक दो जगह पे देखा कि एक ही स्लैब के नीचे साइड में दो कॉलम्स थे, तो दो कॉलम को एक बना सकते थे या बड़ा रेक्टेंगुलर कॉलम बना सकते थे, दो अलग अलग कॉलम्स की.
ठीक है. No. I'm just thinking triangular column का क्या problems है? Okay. Triangular columns, I think when it comes to lateral forces, I don't know how they will actually behave to brace those lateral forces. Neeraj, that's my understanding.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The triangle, the shape you are telling, actually, वो plan में देखने जाएंगे तो triangle है, but to support the vertical load, it acts same as the rectangle. So
yeah.
Cross section.
But if you see one large triangle, that is the most stable structure is the pyramid, right?
Yeah. Again, that is pyramid, not a triangle.
It's not a triangle. It's a pyramid.
Yeah, pyramid.
I have argument. अगर हम लोगों ने अगर वो स्लैब के जो कुछ फोर्सेस है उसे अगर रिजॉल्व किया, वो कॉर्नर पे आके एक क्या कहते हैं एंगल पे या 45 डिग्री पे आउटवर्ड टोर्ड होंगे ना, मतलब यहाँ से कॉर्नर पे स्लैब के, तो अगर वहीं पे हम लोगों ने अगर उसे उसके अपोजिट डायरेक्शन में अगर ट्रायंगुलर ये रखा कॉलम, तो वो ज्यादा काम करेगा ना, कम मटेरियल में उस ज्यादा एफिशिएंट रहेगा वो।
नहीं, श्याम, आई जस्ट वांट टू टेल यू वन थिंग। जब हम लोग ये डिजाइन करते हैं ना कॉलम, उसमें क्रॉस सेक्शन पहले उसका डिजाइन करते हैं, तो कितना एरिया लगे, लाइक अभी हम लोग फाउंडेशन डिजाइन, व्हेन वी आर डिजाइनिंग फाउंडेशन, we decide the surface area कि कितना ground पे touch होगा. So same way, cross section is also required to be designed the first. उसमें ही distribution of steel कितना आएगा वो decide करते हैं. बाद में उसका shape change करो मत करो, that doesn't matter that much. But cross section area is important, उतना होना चाहिए. तो वो shape से इतना matter नहीं करेगा इस stage.
और 2 कॉलम का पूछा था।
हाँ, बट 2 कॉलम तूने कहाँ देखा और उसका कॉन्टेक्स्ट क्या है, पहले वो समझा।
एक तो मैंने शायद ताज होटल के बाहर देखा, ताज होटल।
सो
और
वाज
दूसरा शायद हाई कोर्ट था शायद,
ठीक है। सो वाज द सेकंड कॉलम, डिड यू थिंक दैट इट वाज एडेड लेटर? दैट्स वन क्वेश्चन। ओके, that could be a possibility. I don't know where you are talking about. I'm just giving you scenarios.
What
Okay.
so observe is the base of that column, Shirish. He needs to know if both of them combined on the same base.
Yeah. So one is that either that this second column was added later as a structural kind of a stability to the deflection that is happening perhaps in the lintel or somewhere else. That could be one. The second is that like how Mamta is saying, whether it is actually that entire set of 2 columns is actually designed together and transfers the load together to the base. Okay, if that's the case, then what you are actually doing is that you are eliminating. There could be 2 reasons. One is you are eliminating the extra material which you don't need to put, and the second could be an aesthetic reason that you want to create some kind of a aesthetic kind of double column kind of a sense. It could be these 2 reasons. It would be nice if you next time when you are moving around, you take a picture, okay, and which is what we will always or make a sketch of it. Yeah, show us, but your observation has to be more acute in order to bring sort of more meaning. You learn from that observation then. Okay.
You're also talking about a certain specific period of construction. When you're talking about Taj, that's the old Taj, I'm presuming, because you're also saying it's the High Court building that you saw these twin columns, right? This was used a lot during that colonial period. I'm not very strong on my history with all this, but yeah, this was the time where for aesthetics, these twin columns were used. If you just Google it, you'll see a whole lot of structures that come out with this kind of twin columns at the porch, at the entrance, and things like that.
Yeah, so I think Shravan has shared an image. I think, yes, so if it is like this, then it's a very different story. Okay, then the whole thing is actually designed together, okay, for aesthetic reasons, but structurally it is serving actually as a single column, because the pedestal and the base are actually one. Okay, so if this is the case, then it's a different thing. If that column is completely added separately, then it is because of deflections and another second layer of structural stability is added. It could be. Okay, shall we go ahead?
Yeah. I think even I'm trying to post an image on the chat. Let's see later. Okay, so coming back to this, now we are just taking you through a very common example to try and understand how that structure has been designed. Okay, what were the decisions taken and how sort of the structural members didn't restrict the architect to design the spaces. Okay, you're all aware of this structure. It's Villa Savoy by Corbusier, and we have, I think, immensely discussed about how he has sort of opened up the space for use without any kind of restriction. So the method that he chose to do it was by using these columns, or what he has called as pilotis. Okay, that's the way he's been able to free up a lot of space. Let me take you through the structure. Okay, so So that's what's happening on the ground floor. And you can see the dotted line, which is the first floor above, which covers a larger area compared to what the ground floor is covering. And the load of all that is coming onto the columns below. Okay. So what I want you to observe is that the beams are not missing, contrary to what you might think when you just look at a picture of the building. The beams are not missing, but they're very cleverly designed so that they sort of disappear from your line of sight when you're looking at the building. That's the first floor. Just observe this and I'll take you to the structural thing a couple of slides later. Okay. So here you can see that in the bottom part of the drawing, you can see that the columns are within the structure. They're inside the structure, and the actual skin of it has now moved out. Okay. That means there are no columns on the external face of the structure. I'm particularly looking at the front or the facade of the building in this case. Okay. So what that has helped us to achieve, or helped Corbusier to achieve, is the ribbon window that we keep talking about all the time. Since there are no structure in between, that complete is free to be there without any hindrance. Okay. That's again the topmost floor. So you try and observe what is happening with the internal walls. They are not actually forming any kind of following any kind of structured way of being there. Like in the first year, we repeatedly told you, for a load bearing structure, any wall on the upper floor will have to have a wall below to take the load, correct? In the case of RCC now, we have eliminated that restriction just by the use of this material. And what this material helps us to do, we have completely eliminated that. So once my structure is in place, I'm just free to do as I please inside that space. Okay. So if you look at this circulation diagram from the left, that is the ground floor. There is a ramp. There is also a regular formal staircase. There is this parking, and observe the alignment of the walls. Okay. When I move to the first floor, I don't see any kind of repetition of the walls from the top floor that have come down to the lower floor, right? And again, when you look at the topmost floor, I don't see that happening at all. What I do see is that columns I can see have been repeated, and we'll check out how that has sort of come into the design. Okay, this is, I'm just showing you this slide because the architect has also incorporated green spaces within the building. Okay, this is the way the building looks in the elevation. Also, the beam there at the stilt level or the pilloty level can be seen. Okay, I can see the columns which are set at the back on the first floor, but they are not hindering my windows or my fenestration space at all. Okay. So yes, now observe the column distribution, right? So it's though there are certain columns that are repeating from the ground floor to the first floor, you can also see that some of those columns have disappeared. They're not repeated, they're not there. So what is happening with this structure, right? I've just enlarged the drawing so that you're able to observe. Also observe that there are circular columns, there are square columns, and there is one rectangular column. One single black column that you see is repeated on all the floors. Okay. This is what is happening to the column structure on the first floor. And when I overlay them, I've sort of purposely not overlapped it exactly precisely so that you can see what's happening below. When you overlay this is what you observe, correct? So the red columns that were on the ground floor not necessarily are coming up onto the first floor. And some of them that are there on the second floor are not there on the first floor. Like you see the square column between, okay, and I am going to do explaining how the load transfer is taken. Could you please help out here?
Yeah. So the basic grid is 5 column by 5 column, and the squarish rectangular shape has been taken. And then the alteration with the column grid is done by the positioning of ramp and lift to support those areas. So here in section, in the next slide. In section, as you see, the columns are a bit inside than the exterior skin. So exterior portion is a cantilever portion, the red one marked in red. And then the green rectangle I have marked, it is the corridor block. So in those corridor for ramp and the staircase, the columns have been designed on the periphery. Then the blue portion which you see is basically the typical RCC grid frame system. In the second system I have shown, it has shown the transfer, how the load is going down. So the blue down arrows which you see at this center area, those are the columns, they are supporting the ramp and the area around it. And red columns are red arrow marks which I have shown, those are the columns which are in the grid, the 5x5 grid which I have said. So all the slab ka load is transferring on the columns, the cantilever slab ka load is also transferring on the peripheral columns, and it has been transferred to the ground. Another thing which makes the first floor floating is that they might have used inverted column as well. Generally, what we see in a regular RCC building is the column is hanging below the slab. So that can be designed upwards. So those columns are, those beams are called inverted beams. So that way also they might have hid all the beams on the periphery, which we are seeing. Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Hi, Mamta. We can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
You're on mute, I guess.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, any questions regarding the structure? You want to go back like to see the grid and then the section. Any questions coming out of this? Because you will be required to create these kind of analysis diagrams when we give you case studies to do.
So isn't it generally a bad idea to kind of leave columns without a column below them? Like we've always seen with fenestrations and support members that you kind of have them stack on top of each other, right?
See, this is purely RCC structure which they have designed. So they have taken, it is generally why we don't prefer why we generally prefer column below column is to reduce the reinforcement requirement of the slab. So the reinforcement might have been increased where there is no column below. They might have provided a stronger beam or stronger stronger beams below that to support the hanging column above it. Generally, it is not preferred due to cost restraints, but that thing shouldn't come in your mind while designing. I mean, it is the later thing which we generally do.
So it's not as efficient, but it's not like that's bad. Is that what
it is, since you are going for, since this is just the ground plus one or two structure, that's why these kind of small modifications can be done. But justify your design as well. I mean, that's why the has done this thing and moved shifting the.
Okay, thank you. Wait.
Yeah, so this is just to show you the staircase block and how the circulation goes when we give out these buildings.
Sorry, there was a lag between your slides. That's
okay.
all.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So when we give out these structures for you to analyze, you're going to have to try and understand how the ramp and the staircase meet at certain levels. Because in case you want to move from the staircase block to the ramp or the ramp to the staircase block, you can still do that. Okay. These are some construction details from the same building, which we can share with you. And then, Shirish, do you want to go into showing them the examples of the other kind of slab?
Yeah, I'm going to show. Are you done, Mamta?
Yeah, because I think this we'll do next time,
This
right?
yeah, we'll do this next
Yeah.
time. Right,
Oh,
okay,
yeah,
so
sure.
if you stop sharing, I will start sharing.
If you can share now.
Yeah, I'll share.
Yeah.
All right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, just a sec. Let me go to presentation mode. All right. Okay. Since we were discussing some of the things about how forces are moving in the buildings, one thing is very, very clear. Every component of building eventually will exert load, which has to be transferred to the foundation. Okay. You can, like for example, in Villa Savoy, somebody asked a question whether Villa Savoy is a frame structure. Okay. And somebody and we showed you some examples of frame structure and of sort of block structures and so on and so forth. So I think a Villa Savoy uses the same principles of the frame structure, okay, but it does not necessarily follow the same rules of placement of elements which are there in a general frame structure like the apartment building which is built outside my home right now. Okay, so it plays around with those, but essentially it is still in the same logic of a frame structure. There is possibility of creating openings which are much larger. There is possibility of creating shifting things which a frame structure generally allows within the given kind of framing. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a building that we have seen many times, okay, to understand what components of this building actually are playing fundamental role in creating the structural stability and logic. Okay, so this is the entrance to, everybody knows this building. This is the entrance actually which happens from the back lane, and you can see the pergolas over here. Yeah, these pergolas are structural because they are actually tying the rain.
Can you go up slow? We can't see the slide yet.
Okay, thanks for telling me. Okay, is it there now?
Not yet.
Yes.
Yes.
That one.
Is it there?
Yes.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
Okay, just hold on a second. Yeah. Okay, so if you see what appears like pergolas is actually not pergolas. They are structural members, almost like beams, that are stretching all the way from inside the cantilever, and they are pulled backwards and they are connecting to the rock which is at the back. Okay, and I'll explain you why this happens in this building. This is the quintessential image of falling water that we always see. We see these large cantilever slabs, we see the walls at the back, and we see a kind of a waterfall that comes from below these slabs. This is the intended sort of result that I think Frank Lloyd Wright wanted to give this sense of this kind of floating slab. These floating slabs also carry live loads. Okay, people actually are always on these slabs, and the more you come towards the outer edge of the slab, the more is the bending that is coming in the entire slab. Okay, these are the ways in which forces are actually moving. Sorry, in the structure. There are 5 kinds of loads that the structure is exposed to. Yeah, There is a dead load of the elements themselves. There is a live load where everybody is walking and everybody is using and all the furniture which is there. And then there are certain things which are called carried loads because this is a cantilever structure. So you are actually carrying the load from the extended edges and you're carrying them back onto the base of the building. And then there are wind loads. Okay, what is the base of the building in this case? Yeah, the base of the building is created with three elements, three components. You have a stone bearing wall, you have the natural boulder onto which the main foundation sits, and you have what are called concrete bolsters. Okay, these concrete bolsters are anchored to the boulder over here, and they are anchored by piling into the boulder. And if you remember, I had shown you a section of falling water in your theory of design lecture where you saw the piles actually going into the boulder. Okay, this is the fundamental base of the structure. Yeah, when you look at the photograph, when the light is good, if you look at it, you will be able to see other slides changing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
When you look at it carefully,
Yes.
you can actually see the bolsters which are below the cantilevered structure. Okay, below the apparent cantilever structure which is over here, there are bolsters below. Okay, there is a cantilever, and that cantilever has substantial kind of bending that has happened in this building, which in the recent years they have been constantly pre-stressing the cantilevers and pulling it back again to the base. This is the inside of that slab. Somebody had said that there are main beams and there are joists, and then there is that kind of a sequencing. Yes, sometimes when slabs are created, okay, you don't want that entire slab to be so thick. Okay, so what you do is you break up the entire slab into subcomponents. These are the primary beams of that slab. These are the secondary beams of that slab. Okay, and yes, this is an inverted slab. Okay, so from the bottom, we are going to see a flat soffit. Okay, and the top, you're going to fill into this and you're going to level it out with your flow finish. But inside the slab is actually a complex kind of layer of, it's a grid slab with primary and secondary sort of components. The outer beam, which you see, is actually upturned further to create the parapet of this building. As you can see over here, if you remember this photograph, what you see over here as a parapet is a part of the beam itself. There is no other railing in this case. Yeah, he doesn't put any other railing. Okay, I also want you to notice the scale of the building. It's fairly small. Okay, let's go ahead. All right, so this is we are standing now on one of those terraces in the building, which means that you are actually inside the structure of the cantilevered slab. Okay, because this is a structural component of the building. This is not a parapet which is raised only, right? Okay, then comes the second floor. Okay, see how strategically, as the floors are added, the material or the sort of the cantilever is actually reduced as the floors get added. Okay, there are different ways in which he does this. He still introduces some kind of pergola elements and things like that. Okay, this is the second level slab. Again, a part of the slab is actually hollow and it is created with beams, secondary beams and primary beams, and then it is infilled. And you can see that gets anchored back into the rock or the boulder at the back. And then finally, he adds a third floor to it. Okay, in the third floor, if you notice, a part of it actually is just a slab. Yeah, because there are enough structural supports here for you to span with just the slab thickness. Okay, where the supports are limited, he has to go in for this kind of a beam and infill situation, which needs to be then tied back into the main kind of wall and tied back into the boulder for it to sort of cantilever and flange out. And then finally, there is a small roof which gets added. Again, looking back at this diagram, you will now see in the cross section where you have a series of beams which are infilled. Okay, here's where you can see there's a complete network of beams that runs behind. You will never see it from the outside. You see it when you analyze the structure and you ask the questions of structural stability to that building, is when you will start to realize. And this is a fascinating exercise for us to look at a building. Okay, you see an image of a building. What are the components of the building from the 4 images that you have gotten? Okay, what is the diagram or the plan of the building, right? And what are the insides of those components of the building? Those are the questions that we should ask every time we see a building. I'm again, the link is over here. You can see many of these structural discussions with falling water. The cantilevers themselves from the very beginning had started to show deflection. Okay, and eventually that deflection on the outer edge went up to 6 inches. Okay, or 7 inches also. What that meant is that if you look at what that meant is, if you see the cantilever deflecting, okay, it meant that it was putting structural loads on the windows, and several of the glass panels would crack. Yeah, and they had to replace these glass panels frequently. The windows are metallic windows, so the frame itself was able to take the deflection because it is a metal frame, but the glass couldn't, and so the glass used to crack. Yeah, that was one of the ways in which they were able to tell the kind of deflection that the structure was going through. Okay, I'm now going to show you another example. This is in Hyderabad, and this building we saw last year when we were there. They wanted to, they're I think planning to build a metro line that will go over here, and they simply sliced off this building. Yeah, the building was sliced off. Okay, somebody was asking me, is it possible to do it and things like that. If you have good structural information about the building, and if you have a good structural engineer who's advising you, okay, it is possible to do things like these. Okay, you see the building where my cursor is was also sliced, and then they later on built up the facade over here. This building got sliced and they've not done anything with it. Okay, this is actually possible in an RCC structure. In a timber frame structure, this is not easily possible because the timber frame structure is made with many small components. Okay, so unless you are able to close the components, it is very difficult to do this in timber frame structure. In an RCC frame, removing this part of the building, okay, in this particular case has not affected to the overall stability of this part of the building. It is the way in which this structure is designed, right? I'm showing you one more. This is looking at that structure from the front, where the whole thing was sliced and opened up. Yeah, I'm just zooming in. In Hyderabad itself, then we went to the big garden in Hyderabad. I forget its name, and we found this structure, which is also an RCC structure. Okay, this is called Masjid Chiran Palace in Hyderabad. It's by an architect named Eric Marrott. I think he was an Australian, if I'm not wrong. And the building was, I think, built in the 1960s. Okay, I'll show you some of the images of the building. So you can see the structure is very clear. It's like an umbrella that sticks out onto two sides. Okay, with these becoming the sort of points at which the loads come down. Okay, so it's like two umbrellas. Okay, both sort of supported here in the middle, and there's an arching kind of an effect that happens. But there is no column in this. This entire thing is designed as one element. Yeah, this is the inside of the structure. Yeah, inside the roof is actually a complex system of beams. In order for it to create a concave, yeah, it has to have a concave. So it is the behavior, although it is built with beams, it has a shell effect in it. The entire forcing is controlled by the kind of beam lattice that is going over here. Okay, none of the walls touches the roof. So we went at a day when there was rainfall, okay, and you could see all the rainwater had come inside. And we were talking to some of the people who actually use the mosque, and they said that's actually a problem in the monsoons. It is difficult to use it, but the structure is so beautiful in the summers that everybody comes here in the afternoons. Okay, quite a fascinating little concrete structure.
Shirish, I guess these the advanced labs, like we should show them next time.
Yeah,
Because
I'm showing them this because the possibilities in an RCC structure are also quite immense. So if you're thinking that an RCC structure is only limited to framing and things like that, please don't. Okay, it's not. It can you can actually mold RCC in very different ways as well. Okay, to create some fascinating structures. That's all. Okay, I'll stop here.
can I show that animation
Yeah.
of RCC construction?
Sure. I'm stopping.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to start the animation. This
Sorry,
is prepared.
wait a second. There is some comments. You want to take those first?
Yeah, sure.
Those are structural columns because they are taking loads around the ramp and corridor. This was these are all earlier comments. Why has it been inverted? Why has it been inverted? Did we answer that?
No, that was for falling water, I guess. Why
Yeah.
they have used inverted slab?
Yeah, why have they used inverted slabs? Does somebody want to answer, or shall I go ahead? So okay, so one of the reasons why they have been inverted is because when you invert the slab, it is easy to fill in the slab. Okay. Otherwise, you have to do something like a false ceiling. You understand? So inverting the slab allows you to fill the slab so that we get clean soffits on both sides. Yeah. In case of falling water, Frank Lloyd Wright is not sort of he actually wants narrower depths to this space. Okay, so if you are inside falling water, you will realize that the slab to the bottom of the upper slab distance is very narrow. And what he does with that is by narrowing it down, he actually pushes the entire sort of space out into the side windows. Okay, it begs you to move outwards always. This is a kind of a compression and release sort of experience that architects use many times. Yeah, you will see that effect being used very well by Charles Correa when it comes to certain entrances to his buildings. Yeah, the entrances of the buildings are compressed and then they release you into a bigger space. At the same time, falling water is also in a very cold climate. So you want to keep the volume of your space tighter so that you can retain the heat that is generated from the fireplaces. Okay, so you're reducing the volumes. Okay, the bedrooms are very tiny in falling water, very tiny. The kitchen is very tiny as well. Okay, sorry, Mamta, go ahead.
No, that's fine. It's essential to discuss these things. So we'll be showing them, of course, more examples next time as well.
Yeah.
So now just tell me if you can see if my screen has come on. Otherwise, you will miss out the animation.
Yeah, it has.
Yeah, should I play it?
Let's see, plate.
Yeah.
Mamta, there is a lag.
Yeah.
Huh? We don't see anything changing. Why don't you save it on the save it on
Yeah.
a
Yeah, I can put it up over here for them so that
yeah,
they can watch it. Yeah.
and watch it their own time.
So
Yeah.
you have to understand that there is a PCC bed, then the foundation sort of footing comes on that PCC bed, and how the rest of the construction takes place.
Yeah. Let them see the video because it's lagging. I don't. Are you guys able to see the video?
No, it froze.
No.
No, it stopped at 16 seconds.
Okay.
Is it like continuing after a point, or it's just completely stopped?
It jumps now. In my case, it has reached
Continue.
31 seconds, but nothing beyond that.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I'll upload.
13, then 31.
Yeah.
It is 13 and then it's 31 now.
Yeah.
So we've spoken about all these aspects already in the lecture. I'll upload it and you can take a look at it for yourself. Let it run now.
Yeah.
But you all, if you take it, I mean, if you watch it, you'll be able to understand better because there's reinforcement that's shown how it's tied to each other and, all that.
Okay. In the
Yeah,
in
any
the-
questions?
any questions, please? Yeah. In the meantime.
Rutika, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that was a great presentation with both the examples covered and the discussions. Like I think these examples are kind of making them realize a lot of things. So I think we'll take up. I think we'll have more questions like these in the next session. I think.
Yeah.
Anyone else from the students? Do you guys have any questions?
Shirish,
Yeah.
was the infill in the falling water thing? Because it has to be light well as well, right? So,
What was the infill?
yeah.
Yeah, we should find that out. But I suspect that the infill was actually stones and things that were from the site. Okay, because I remember reading somewhere that the site was very remote. Okay, and to actually get concrete casting done in the I think it's built in 1928. Okay, in that remote location was quite a challenge. So if you see, the walls are built with stones which are actually from the same land. Okay, so I'm suspecting that infill was also material that you would find on the same site. That there was no special lightweight material that was used in the infill. I know that if you go online, you will find that when later restoration has happened, okay, of the structure, they have actually dug into that infill and they have inserted pre-stressing cables into those cantilevered members to pre-stress them back onto the backside. So those case studies are also there. You can find it online.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So one question I had was kind of regarding form, space, and order, because in architecture theory we looked at it a lot in terms of like the column placement and everything. So does a lot of that book also have to deal with the structural kind of placements of them? Because a lot of the aesthetic that was derived in earlier days, even the golden ratio and everything else, had some basis in structure, right? The way the load transferred. So would that be part of the reason that a lot of the architectural styles described in the book worked out that way?
I think RCC changes things a lot. Okay, because unlike stone construction, okay, where the principles of load transfer are entirely sort of dependent on, say for example, a construction of an arch. Okay, if you want an arch to span a certain distance, okay, your sides will have to be loaded a certain way, okay, because the lateral force that emerges from an arch as you go larger is much higher, correct? Yeah. So in that sense, yes, the earlier examples that are there are related to structural logics of construction. Okay, but in RCC, these logics are actually transformed. In case of RCC, with the ability to create cantilevers and large span structures, you suddenly have a very new sort of way of looking at form, space, and order. This is my reading, which is exciting actually, that you are able to create structures like that. Yeah. Anyone else? Does that, Shravan, does that answer a little bit of your question? Maybe not entirely. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I mean it does. Like it's a very open-ended question, so there's not like a particular this thing.
Yeah, no,
So,
I'm just trying to think that the idea of the golden sort of ratio, okay, in terms of construction, I cannot continue building in the golden ratio beyond a certain point. Do you agree? Because the material doesn't allow me to do. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when I find a material that is allowing me to create much larger spans, okay, I am able to do that without following a golden ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what RCC and steel also to some degree. But even in case of steel, you had to sort of follow. See, the fact that you are now able to cast a component, unlike dress it from a wooden member, okay, that you're able to cast. So steel also you could cast a longer member, right? Okay, but steel you couldn't make a thicker member because it used to get very heavy, and then transportation is a problem. And also steel casting requires industry. Yeah, I cannot cast steel members on my site, correct? So then I have to rely on factory mechanism to cast me members which can be transportable, and hence the sizes of steel sections in a certain way. Okay, so then again steel gets into steel construction gets into assembling of those members and not casting of the members, whereas RCC allows me to cast on site. Yeah. So I can cast a very big long cantilever on site, and I can make it very thick also, because I'm going to pour material into my formwork. Yeah. My formwork is assembled. My reinforcements are assembled. Okay. And but I pour concrete and I cast the whole thing. Yeah. Do you understand these two fundamental differences between casting and assembling?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's a very fundamental way in which buildings and making of buildings has changed. Yeah. Anyone else? Neeraj, what? Yeah. Someone else.
हम लोग के पास ऐसा कोई केस है क्या कि विदाउट आरसीसी हम लोगों ने हेवी कौन सा कैंटिलीवर बनाए विदाउट आरसीसी?
विदाउट आरसीसी स्टील में बना सकता है ना?
हाँ, मतलब आरसीसी स्टील से छोड़ के कोई और टिपिकल मटेरियल या कोई vernacular material?
But before we discuss that, what is the property that the cantilever needs to actually sort of deal with? Okay, what is it about the cantilever? Like Mamta showed a lamppost, a street lamppost. Okay, what are the kind of forces that actually go through a cantilevered element? Neeraj, you want to interject?
I mean, in what scenario he's thinking that I wanted to? I mean, in what? Shyam, right?
Shyam, yeah.
I think he wants an example. He wants an Indian example of a large cantilever constructed in some traditional material. Am I right, Shyam?
Yes.
I have seen wooden cantilevers with brackets. So maybe not entirely cantilever, but with brackets, it can go about 2 meters. I have seen. I mean, not more than that.
It can be up to 2 meters. Yeah.
Yeah. Above that, I don't know.
But Sham, suppose if you had a log of wood, okay, which was say 20 meters long, and the circular cross section of that wood was say 60 centimeters. Sham, are you there? Okay.
Yes.
20 मीटर लंबा और 60 सेंटीमीटर उसका क्रॉस सेक्शन है लकड़ा, ठीक है। अगर तेरे पास ऐसा लकड़ा मिल सकता है, हाँ, तो तू लकड़े में भी बड़ा कैंटिलीवर बना सकता है।
ओके। मैंने ये सोचा था, सिम्बा नहीं, लायन किंग में वो जो बच्चे को उठाता है, इट्स अ टाइप ऑफ कैंटिलीवर ना, जहाँ पे उसके पास एक बड़ा मेंबर है,
स्टोन प्लेटफॉर्म।
तो अगर मुझे लगा कि किसी के पास इतना बड़ा मेंबर हो, उससे उसने वो कैंटिलीवर ऐसा कुछ बनाया वैसा कोई एग्जांपल।
तो वैसे तो तू पत्थर में अभी तू इफ यू गो टू हैव यू बीन टू एलोरा, the Kailashnath temple in Ellora, you've been? Yeah. If you are inside the sides of the temple, okay, not the main temple, the side galleries of the temple. Those side galleries actually stick out substantial distance in stone. But please understand, the height, the depth that stone has is the entire mountain. Okay. So you understand that it has all to do with the availability of material, how much you want to cantilever, and what depth you are able to achieve. Okay. Why I asked you about the timber section is because, I mean, I have seen a large timber section cantilever that Neeraj is talking about in the Forbidden City in Beijing. Okay, where you find giant members of timber. Okay, but please understand, not, I mean, that can be done only if you have a kingdom and an access to forests where you are growing, where you are cutting virgin forests that have grown for 150 years. Okay, okay. A single log of wood like this is very rare. So what do you do in that case? Okay, you use smaller components. You create trusses, which is what is done in case of bridges or in case of timber trusses. Okay, and then you find ways of cantilevering out without a single member as a cantilever, which is what the example Mamta showed. You can cantilever 150 meters with a steel lattice structure. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else, or shall we call it a day?
Next time we are going to be showing you some more examples, and I think then we can open up the discussion. We'll have more time in the next class to be able to have this discussion. I'm also, I think by next time we should be able to share this sort of examples of number of structures which you will have finalized similarly to what we have done today. Of course, you're going to have to diagrammatize them. We'll explain how that is. It's not immediate. It's not an immediate exercise, of course, but gradually we'll sort of walk you through that, and you're going to be able to carry out this sort of structural analysis for these different structures that we will give. You're also going to have to your own houses. So these exercises also we'll introduce to you next time. Yeah, and we'll open it up to a larger discussion next time.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.